Now it's time for perspective on today's programme. And with the world thinking more and more about green issues, and even in many countries now, voting more and more over green issues, it's noticeable that it's often the world's young people who are most concerned by the environment. Global warming, deep concern over single-use plastics, and of course emission levels were just some of the top issues. It's all about awareness, of course, and trying to inform and educate people about the issues, even those far younger than voting age. Well, this book is just one example. It's called Lily and the Polar Bears. It tells the story of polar bears who are forced from their homeland to come and live in a human city, and tells us how they survive and adapt even to their newfound home. And with me to discuss it is author and illustrator as well of the book, Jion Sheibani. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us today. First of all, just tell us about the book and about you as well, because why is this the kind of book, if you like, that you wanted to write?
Well, green issues have always been really close to my heart. One of my very first jobs was working for the Green Party in Brussels. And I think, like a lot of people, I've always had in my imagination that image of polar bears, a polar bear clinging to the ice for dear life. And so that was one of the very first images that I drew of this book. And then I started teaching children, young children, and had children myself, and realised, the impact of picture books on children is, immense.
So it's the perfect way to kind of bring together your two worlds, if you like.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And when I go into schools now, children already, I'm always surprised about how much they know already about climate change. And when I ask them the question, what would you do if, what would a polar bear president do? What would they change about our world today? They've got, tons of ideas about how to make the world a much greener place.
How do you work out exactly what the message is? Because I mean, in the book, the polar bears, their land is melting, so they come to a human city. But then they actually finish up kind of adapting and fitting in with human society. I mean, is that the right message to get across? Yeah,
well, actually, it took a long time to get that ending right. The early drafts, they were very packed, and but when we landed on that last line, and finally everybody felt at home, we really felt that was the right message. This world belongs to everybody, and what's great about children is they're not aware of national boundaries and frontiers, and so they really respond perfectly to that message.
I mean, even though some might say that the green message might be that the polar bears shouldn't adapt to the human life, way of life.
Yes, but yeah, you've got to be aware in picture books to keep the story simple. That's the other thing. Yeah, and leave room for discussion as well beyond the picture book. There's only so much you can get into those 32 pages. But when I go into workshops and schools, there's so many discussion points, and not just on the green point. Obviously, it's about refugee crisis. And this book was written just as the Syrian refugee crisis was happening. So yeah,
so you managed to kind of combine both messages in the same book at the same time.
Absolutely, yeah.
What about the illustrations as well? Because they're a lot of fun, aren't they? With polar bears obviously doing all sorts of different things. I mean, where does that come from you? Have you ever trained in art, for example?
No, I'm a self-taught illustrator, and I've always loved drawing, but I never thought about it as a career. And then when I started teaching, I could see the impact that drawing had on the kids, even just drawing on the board, bringing language teaching to life. I started my own English language schools, actually, called Anglophone. And there we use a lot of literature. And at the end of every single session, we used to read picture books to the kids. And that's still what we do now. At the end of every lesson, even to the 10, 11-year-olds, we read a picture book. And you realise just how much children can learn from stories. It develops so many skills, creativity, and namely empathy. And that's definitely what we need in a crisis like the refugee crisis today. Is empathy.
I hope you're reading your book with them as well.
Yes, of course.
Kids. Yeah, exactly. But it's quite unusual, though. I mean, a lot of the books, even the Julia Donaldson books, for example, which are perhaps the picture books which have really kind of taken over the world. Yeah. Somebody else does the illustrations for it, don't they? I mean, it's quite unusual, perhaps, to find somebody who's able to do both at the same time. Yeah.
Well, I'm very lucky to be able to do both, and what's interesting is how the text and pictures can really complement one another, and how sometimes the image comes first or sometimes the words come first. It's a great thing to be able to do. I'm very lucky.
I suppose it makes it easier that you can do both. You haven't got to go through somebody else and tell them what you're after, what you're looking for.
Yeah, it does make things a lot easier, and it means you can cut text and not be too precious about it, whereas I think maybe authors probably want to keep hold of their word count a little bit more. So yeah.
I want to go back to something that you were talking about at the beginning. You were talking about being an intern in Brussels. You were actually working, weren't you, for Caroline Lucas,
Yes.
who, for people who don't know, she's the Brighton MP in the UK, a Green MP, the only MP
Yes.
in the House of Commons, a
Absolutely,
Green MP. What were you involved doing then, and how did that kind of develop, if you like?
So I was an intern for initially for 6 months. It was on my gap year. I was very young, 18, and it was just an incredible experience. I mean, Caroline Lucas is the most dedicated politician I've ever seen, and actually it was at the outbreak of the Iraq War, so it was a very, very poignant, difficult time, and to see her fighting against that war was really, really remained with me, and you know, and all the environmental policies that she was working on at the time. GMO foods was one of the big things. Had a lasting impact, and even though I didn't go into politics, it's always been something that's close to my heart.
And does it surprise you how much the Green movement, if you like, is starting to grow? Because literally just over the past year or two in Europe, it really feels like people are turning towards the Green Party. It was seen recently in the UK. It's been seen here in France as well.
Yeah, it's great. I don't find it surprising, but it's encouraging. It's hopeful. I mean, I come from a town like Brighton, which is extremely progressive on the green front. But yeah, I'm glad that now we're having serious discussions about climate change, and you know, and I think young people today are really inspired by activists like Greta Thunberg, and there's a huge wave of protests across the globe, which is great to see.
And finally, what's next for you? You're going to think of something else that you can illustrate and write? I
can't say too much about the project I'm working on, but I'm working on a young fiction series. It's about a little boy and his worries. So another big theme, anxiety.
Right. Okay. So nothing to do with the environment this time.
Nothing to do with the environment, but that will feature because it's an anxiety for people.
Okay. So environment it brings anxiety as well. Yeah, I'm sure it does. Yeah. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us, Jion Sheibani, author of Lily and the Polar Bears. There it is one last time. Well worth it. I enjoyed it anyway.
Thank you.